In a small village called Umudike, in the rainforest of southeastern Nigeria, lived a kind farmer named Obina. He was a hard worker, honest, and always willing to help others. Obina lived alone because his wife Ifeoma had passed away from an unknown sickness many years ago. They didn't have any children, and this made Obina feel very lonely, like he was carrying a heavy weight in his heart. The villagers often whispered about the nearby forest known as Nkwa Forest, a dense, impenetrable woodland that was said to be cursed. The elders told stories of strange creatures that roamed its depths, of spirits that could possess the unwary, and of the ancient gods who still lingered there, angry at the mortals who had forgotten them. No one from Umudike dared to venture into Nkwa Forest, not even the most fearless hunters. But one fateful day, Obina's life took a turn that would forever change not just his fate, but the destiny of the entire village. A severe drought had struck Umudike, drying up the rivers and withering the crops in the fields. The villagers were desperate, and their food supplies dwindled rapidly. Obina, who had always been self-sufficient with his small farm, found himself on the brink of starvation. With nothing left to lose, he decided to enter Nkwa Forest, hoping to find water or some forgotten source of food. As Obina ventured deeper into the forest, the air grew thick with moisture, and the light from the sun was all but blocked out by the towering trees. The sounds of the village faded away, replaced by the eerie silence of the cursed woods. Every crack of a branch or rustle of leaves made Obina's heart race, but he pressed on, driven by desperation. Hours passed, and Obina found himself in a part of the forest that seemed untouched by time. The trees here were ancient, their gnarled roots snaking across the ground like the limbs of some sleeping giant. In the center of this grove was a small, clear pool of water, its surface as smooth as glass. Obina dropped to his knees in relief, scooping the cool water into his mouth with his hands. As he drank, he noticed something glinting beneath the water. Curiosity piqued, he reached into the pool and pulled out a small, intricately carved stone amulet. The amulet was warm to the touch, and as Obina held it, he felt a strange sensation wash over him, a sense of being watched. Before he could react, the ground beneath him trembled and the pool of water began to bubble and churn. Obina scrambled back in fear, but it was too late. A massive serpent, its scales shimmering like molten gold, rose from the depths of the pool, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "You have awakened me, mortal," the serpent hissed, its voice echoing through the grove. "For centuries I have slumbered here, bound by the gods for my transgressions, but now I am free." Obina could only stare in horror as the serpent coiled around him, its immense body crushing the very air from his lungs. Just as he thought his end had come, the serpent loosened its grip and lowered its head to meet Obina's gaze. "I see you are not like the others," the serpent said, its voice softening. "You bear the mark of one who has suffered, who has lost much. I offer you a choice, Obina. You can die here, forgotten and alone, or you can become the father of a new race, a race of beings with the power of gods and the wisdom of men." Obina was too terrified to speak, but the serpent seemed to understand his thoughts. "This is no ordinary gift, mortal. You will carry the burden of this decision for the rest of your days. If you choose to accept, you will bear a child, but not a human child. This child will be a dragon, a creature of immense power and terrible beauty. It will bring great change to the world, but whether that change is for good or ill will depend on you." The serpent's eyes gleamed with a mixture of pity and amusement as it watched Obina struggle with the decision. Finally, with a trembling voice, Obina spoke. "I have nothing left in this world. If this is my fate, then I accept it." The serpent's laughter rang through the forest, a sound both joyous and terrifying. "So be it, Obina of Umudike. You shall bear the dragon. But remember this, the path you have chosen is fraught with danger. Guard your heart, for it will be tested in ways you cannot imagine." With that, the serpent disappeared into the pool, leaving Obina alone in the grove. The amulet, now cool to the touch, remained in his hand. As he stumbled back toward the village, Obina felt a strange warmth growing in his belly, a warmth that filled him with both dread and a strange sense of purpose. The drought in Umudike worsened. The villagers grew more desperate, their hope dwindling with each passing day. Obina, however, had withdrawn from the community, spending most of his time alone on his farm. The villagers noticed the change in him. His once robust frame had become gaunt, his skin pale and his eyes hollow. Rumors spread like wildfire, with some saying that Obina had gone mad, while others whispered that he had made a pact with dark forces in Onkwa forest. Unbeknownst to the villagers, Obina's isolation was due to the strange and terrifying changes happening within his body. His stomach had begun to swell, not with fat, but with something far more unnatural. The warmth he had felt in the forest had grown into a fiery heat that radiated from within, consuming him. At first, Obina tried to ignore it, attributing the discomfort to the hardship of the times. But as the days turned into weeks, it became clear that something was growing inside him. One night, as Obina lay in his bed, the pain became unbearable. It felt as though his insides were being torn apart by fire. He writhed in agony, his screams echoing through the empty house. The villagers heard his cries but were too afraid to investigate, believing that Obina had finally succumbed to the madness that had gripped him for so long. In the dead of night, as the moon hung high in the sky, Obina's body convulsed violently, and with a final blood-curdling scream, the child was born. But this was no ordinary child. As Obina lay panting on the floor, drenched in sweat and blood, he looked down at the creature that had come from his own flesh. The dragon was small, no larger than a human baby, but it was unlike anything Obina had ever seen. Its skin was covered in iridescent scales that shimmered in the moonlight, shifting between shades of gold, green, and blue. Two tiny wings, not yet fully formed, protruded from its back, and its eyes glowed with a piercing intelligence that belied its size. It looked up at Obina with an expression that was both curious and knowing. For a moment, father and child simply stared at each other, the weight of what had just occurred hanging heavily in the air. Obina's heart pounded as he reached out a trembling hand to touch the creature. The dragon, sensing no malice in its father, leaned into the touch, its warm leathery skin feeling strange yet familiar under Obina's fingertips. Obina knew that his life would never be the same again. He had accepted the serpent's curse, and now he was the father of a dragon, a being of immense power and unpredictable nature. What would become of him? What would become of the village if they ever found out? As dawn approached, the dragon began to grow restless. It emitted small, muffled cries that sounded like a mixture of a newborn's wail and a growl. Obina quickly realized that the dragon was hungry. But what does one feed a creature born from magic and mystery? He tried offering it the little food he had left, dried maize, a bit of yam, and some palm wine, but the dragon rejected it all, turning its head away and hissing in frustration. Desperate and exhausted, Obina remembered the serpent's words. This child will be a dragon, a creature of immense power and terrible beauty. The realization hit him like a blow. This was no ordinary child. The dragon would need sustenance beyond the food of mortals. But what? In a flash of insight, Obina remembered the small pool of water in Unkwa forest, the place where he had found the amulet and where the serpent had emerged. Perhaps the water from that pool held the answer. Without wasting any more time, he wrapped the dragon in a cloth, holding it close to his chest, and set off into the forest. The journey to Unkwa forest was arduous, especially with the dragon cradled in Obina's arms. The creature was growing heavier by the hour, its body radiating an intense heat that made Obina's skin burn where it touched. He pressed on, driven by the thought that this was his only chance to save the dragon and perhaps himself. The sun was beginning to rise when Obina reached the edge of the forest. The villagers were still asleep, oblivious to his departure. He hesitated for a moment, looking back at the village that had been his home for so many years. Deep down, he knew that returning with the dragon would be impossible. If the villagers saw it, they would not understand. They would be terrified. They might even kill the creature, or worse, turn on him, as they believed him to be the harbinger of some terrible curse. With a heavy heart, Obina turned and entered the forest, plunging into the thick undergrowth. The deeper he went, the darker it became, until the only light came from the faint glow of the dragon's eyes. Hours passed as Obina struggled through the dense foliage. He was exhausted, his body weak from the ordeal of childbirth and the pain that still coursed through him. Finally, he reached the grove where he had first encountered the serpent. The pool of water lay still and silent, its surface reflecting the dim light filtering through the trees. Obina fell to his knees at the edge of the pool, carefully unwrapping the dragon and lowering it into the water. To his relief, the dragon immediately calmed, the heat radiating from its body dissipating as it submerged itself in the cool water. Obina watched in awe as the dragon drank deeply, its small body seeming to absorb the very essence of the water. As the dragon fed, Obina felt a strange connection forming between them, a bond that transcended the ordinary relationship between a parent and child. Its body had grown larger, its wings more defined, and its scales now shimmered with a vibrant, otherworldly light. The dragon looked up at Obina, and in that moment, he knew that the creature understood him. The journey back to Umudika was markedly different from Obina's earlier trek into the forest. The dragon, now stronger and more aware, stayed close to him, occasionally flying ahead to scout the path before returning to his side. Its presence, though intimidating at first, quickly became a source of comfort for Obina. He knew that the dragon, for all its power, was still a child that needed guidance, protection, and love. The dragon staying hidden among the trees while Obina walked ahead. As they neared the village, Obina noticed that something was wrong. The usual sounds of morning activity, the clatter of pots, the chatter of women at the well, the laughter of children, were absent. A sense of dread settled over him as he quickened his pace. When he finally emerged from the forest, Obina was met with a scene of chaos. The village was in disarray, with homes burned to the ground and the air thick with the acrid smell of smoke. Villagers huddled together in groups, their faces etched with fear and despair. Obina rushed forward, his heart pounding. "What happened?" he asked the first person he came across, an elderly woman named Nena, who had always been kind to him. Nena looked up at him with tear-filled eyes. "The warriors came," she whispered. "They came in the night demanding our food and water. When we couldn't give them enough, they destroyed everything." Obina's blood ran cold. He had heard of the band of warriors that had been terrorizing the neighboring villages, but he never imagined they would come to Umudike. The village had always been small and unremarkable, not worth the attention of such ruthless men. As he stood there, trying to process the devastation, Obina felt a sudden surge of anger, an anger that was not entirely his own. The dragon, still hidden in the forest, had sensed the injustice and was reacting to it. Obina could feel its desire to protect, to fight back against those who had caused so much suffering. But how could he unleash such a powerful creature on the village? The dragon's rage, while righteous, could easily spiral out of control, causing even more destruction. Obina had to make a decision, and he had to make it fast. "Where are they now? The warriors?" Nena pointed toward the north, where the road leading out of the village disappeared into the distance. "They went that way," she said, her voice trembling. "They said they would return if we didn't find more to give them." Obina nodded, a plan forming in his mind. He would follow the warriors and confront them, but he wouldn't do it alone. The dragon was powerful, but it needed guidance that only he, as its father, could provide. Before he could leave, however, Obina knew he had to protect the villagers. He couldn't leave them vulnerable to another attack. He quickly gathered the remaining elders and explained his plan, leaving out the part about the dragon. He told them to gather everyone in the village and take them to the caves on the outskirts, where they could hide until the danger had passed. The elders, too frightened and desperate to question his plan. As the villagers hurried to follow Obina's instructions, he made his way back to the edge of Nkwa forest, where the dragon waited. The creature had sensed his turmoil and approached cautiously, its glowing eyes searching his face for answers. "We must confront the warriors," Obina said, kneeling beside the dragon. "They have brought suffering to our people, and they will continue to do so unless we stop them. But we must be careful. I know your power is great, but it must be controlled. Do you understand?" The dragon tilted its head, a low rumble resonating from deep within its throat. Obina could feel its agreement, but also its impatience. The dragon was ready to unleash its fury, but it trusted Obina to guide it. Together they set off toward the north, following the path the warriors had taken. The road was long and winding, but Obina's determination and the dragon's swift flight made the journey quicker than he had expected. As they moved, the bond between them deepened, and Obina could sense the dragon's thoughts more clearly. He could feel its raw energy, a well of power that seemed almost infinite, but also a growing understanding of the world around it. By the time they caught up with the warriors, the sun was beginning to set. The group of men, rough and battle-hardened, had set up camp in a clearing by the road. They laughed and shouted, drinking from stolen gourds and boasting of their conquests. Obina watched them from the cover of the trees, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anger. He knew that confronting them directly would be dangerous, but he also knew that he couldn't allow them to continue their rampage. The dragon shifted beside him, its body tense with anticipation. Obina placed a hand on its neck, feeling the heat beneath its scales. "Wait," he whispered. "We need to be smart about this." He considered his options. The warriors were strong, but they were also overconfident. They had no reason to suspect an attack, especially not from a single man and his strange companion. Obina knew that their strength lay in their numbers, but he also knew that they would be vulnerable if they were taken by surprise. Obina took a deep breath and stepped out of the trees, the dragon following close behind. As they approached the camp, the warriors noticed them and fell silent, their drunken laughter replaced by wary suspicion. The leader of the group, a tall man with a scar running down the side of his face, stood up and sneered. "What do we have here?" he called out, his voice dripping with mockery. "A lone farmer and his pet lizard? Have you come to beg for mercy, old man?" Thank you for watching. Do not forget to like, share, and leave me a comment in the comments section. Also, do not forget to subscribe to my channel and click on the bell notification button to get notified when I upload the next part of this story. Bye for now.